Hey everyone, welcome to my Ranger School adventure where I'm going through every day of my journey through the U.S. Army's Ranger School. Today I'll be going through day 1 and day 2 of the Ranger assessment phase. These were some of the most grueling days of my entire life, and I learned some very valuable lessons that I've carried with me throughout my Army career. If you missed the previous video, I'm not going to go through a recap here, but you can check it out here, somewhere up here. I highly recommend you go and watch that first and then come and watch this one. Since I posted that video, as you can see, I have put a modicum of effort into production value, and the audio quality should be much better since I got the microphone that I put on my Christmas list. Finally, before we get started, I write a Substack newsletter called The Distro, where I talk about the military and leadership and books and a bunch of other great stuff. There's a free version of the newsletter that you can check out. If you've never used Substack before, click the link and then just drop in your email. It'll ask you what kind of subscription you want. If you just want the free one, just click none. I know it's a little weird how it's worded, but you'll still get the free version of the newsletter and you'll have access to some of the select newsletters in the archive. If you want the full access to the archive, and if you want to receive the more frequent newsletters, which are about once a week, and if you want to be able to comment, there are paid options as well. If you're in the military or if you're an ROTC cadet, you can get the paid option for free. Just sign up for the newsletter using the free version. Use a civilian email account, and then I'll reply to then go ahead and reply to the intro email telling me who you are, and I'll tell you how to get upgraded for free. Okay, let's get started. So in the last video, we finished day 0 where we focused on in-processing and the layout, and now we're starting day 1. I woke up at 04:30. The uniform was PT shirt, PT shorts, dog tags, white socks that covered the ankle bone, and running shoes. We moved outside for formation and then rushed over to the area between the Malvesti obstacle course and the circular fight pit. Everyone was given a piece of fruit, which I thought was very thoughtful. We got the standard brief that everyone gets before a PT test, and then we lined up and we began. The whole class moved into a mass formation behind a set of numbers. Each number corresponded to a position inside the circular fight pit. When the RIs called for the next student, the rank in the front ran to the position that corresponded with their line's number. So if you lined up behind number 9, you ran to the position in the fight pit that has the number 9 next to it. Now, there was a myth circulating around the infantry basic officer leader course at the time that if too many students in the front of the line passed the PT test, then the RIs would just start to fail the people in the back on purpose. This was presumably to control the number of people that got into the course, but when you look at the natural attrition that just happens, there's really no reason for them to do this. These types of myths are perpetuated by those who fail the PT test and want an excuse other than their own weakness for why they didn't pass. This myth, like most about Ranger School, was absolute crap. It did not matter where you were in line. Everyone was graded to the same standard. At least that's what I saw, and I was in the back of the line. So I got in line, I did my push-ups, then I moved out to the area designed for people that had already passed the push-ups and for where they were going to wait to do their sit-ups. The ones who failed were kept in another area and allowed to rest until they were retested. After we completed the push-ups, we were tested on sit-ups, which was done in the exact same way as push-ups. I did my sit-ups, and I moved to the holding area to prepare for the 5-mile run. So we lined up for the run, and the command go was given. I ran the whole 5 miles very hard, wanting to give a strong performance. I think I finished just under 34 minutes, and I was exhausted. It never occurred to me to take it easy on the run and conserve my energy. The only way to get a major plus was to finish in under 32 minutes, which I knew was well beyond my capabilities. After the PT test, we moved to the barracks and changed. With the time hack that we were given, there was no way everyone was going to be able to take a shower. I didn't get one. We changed into our uniforms and fell back outside for chow. The time was probably around 0800. Chow went the same way as the day before, but breakfast was a lot bigger than dinner had been. We went back to the company area and were told to fall back outside with the bag we had packed for the Combat Water Survival Assessment, the CWSA. Now, let me backtrack for a second. During the layout, we packed specific gear into a separate bag and put our name on it. We weren't sure why. but that's what we were told to do. Inside that bag was a pair of ACUs and a pair of boots. We rushed inside, grabbed the bag, came back outside, and loaded the bags onto a truck. We then began a 1.5-mile sprint, and I do mean sprint, down to Victory Pond for the CWSA. We were given a brief demonstration, and then they asked us, who here is a weak swimmer? Some people identified themselves as weak swimmers. I kind of scoffed at them, but they were put on in the front of the line and they were given an orange vest, a life vest. The rest of us were given camouflage life vests. We waited in line for a very long time and got smoked the entire time. Push-ups, flutter kicks, squats, side straddle hop, etc., etc. Finally, my turn came to begin the assessment. I climbed up a ladder to a horizontal beam, which is about 30, 40 feet above the water. That's what it felt like, at least. In the middle of the beam were some wooden steps. Now, the students had to walk up 2 steps and then down 2 steps. On the other side of the beam was a rope that I had to crawl onto. In the middle of the rope hung a ranger tab. And I made my way out to this wooden ranger tab, slapped it, took my legs off the rope so that I was hanging onto the rope with only my hands, and then I sounded off with Ranger Carreau requesting permission to drop. I was told, drop. I fell into the icy water and swam to the shore. Once there, I climbed out, grabbed a metal handle, and moved to the other side of the pond towards the Slide for Life tower. I ran up the stairs, but I wasn't moving fast enough for the RIs at the top, who yelled, "Faster, Ranger, double time!" It's all a game. I could never let comments like that get to my head. My handle was hooked onto the wire, and I began my rapid descent back towards the rope from which I had dropped minutes before. The Slide for Life is what it's called, and the way that it works is that an RI at the opposite end of the pond, where you're sliding towards, he's got a flag. When he raises it, you raise your feet out in front of you, making a 90-degree angle between your legs and your chest. When he drops the flag, you let go of the handle and plunge into the water. It hurts, especially when the first thing that slams into the water is your testicles, which is what happened to me. But showing no signs of weakness, I swam to the shore. I waited in line for the gear drop and the 15-meter swim. Basically, I put on some load-carrying equipment. I was given a weapon. I was pushed backwards into the water, and I had to ditch my gear, including my weapon, and swim 15 meters. This was no problem. Once I got out of the water, I headed over to the tent behind the bleachers to change. Once I put on my dry uniform, I cracked open my MRE. We loaded the bags back onto the truck and ran back to Camp Rogers. During the run, I was really hurting. My legs were cramping, my lungs were burning. A lot of Ranger students fell out, but I made it back with the main group. We got back around noon, 1300. Next was equipment issue. We received items for our future parachute jumps, and we were offered an extra 2-quart canteen, a compass, and a first aid pouch, in case you didn't have those with you. Although this process sounds like it should have gone fast, it took over an hour. We returned to the company area, eager to find out what was next. After that, we were told to go back inside and grab our compasses, whistle, protractor, pencil, and paper in 5 minutes. Are you kidding me? You want me to find all that stuff somewhere in 2 full duffel bags and a rucksack full of crap in 5 minutes? Well, I sprinted back inside, I grabbed all my bags, dumped them all out, found all that stuff, stuffed it all back in the bags, and shoved the whole mess back into my locker. We went back outside and headed to the woods east of Camp Rogers. Once we got there, we did some land navigation practice in preparation for the land navigation exam the next day. We were put in groups of 4, and our group of 4 was given a point to find. It was in a little draw about 200 meters from the start. Now, with 50 other Ranger students looking for the same point, it wasn't very hard to find, but it was nice to ensure that my pace count was correct and that my compass was functioning properly. We gathered back in the bleachers when we were done and were given a talk from the RIs about how things were going to go once we got out to Camp Darby, which was in the next phase. Once we got back to the company area, we were issued D-Star packs, which are worn on the back so that Ranger students can be tracked while they're on the land navigation course. We were told to go inside and get our mouth guards. Yes, mouth guard. I once again had to dump all my stuff to find a small little item and cram all my equipment back into my locker. After chow, we went to the fight pit for hand-to-hand combat, also known as combatives classes. Combatives was not what I thought it was going to be. We didn't learn cool takedowns or chokes or locks. We just did some grappling drills and then ran and bear crawled and buddy carried our way around the pit. Combatives was over about 2100. Once we got back to the company area, we were smoked very late into the night. We didn't get to bed around 0100. And that was the end of day one at Ranger School. And at the end of that day, I was hurting. My feet hurt, my legs hurt. I was tired, especially after getting smoked until 0100. They're making you do push-ups and flutter kicks and run in place and burpees and all these different things. And it's just nonstop. They're trying to see who has the guts to stay here, who really wants it. Because when you get to the later phases, and as we're going to find out when we get there, as you get to the later phases, you're going to find out that if you don't have the will to be there, you're not going to make it, and you're going to bring the entire platoon down. So they really want to know who wants to be here, who really wants it. And so that's the end of day one. Now, going into day two, wake up was around 0330. That's right. We went to bed at 01 and got up at 3:30. We were given another brief on the boundaries of the land nav course, the locations of the water points, and then they checked our D-Star packs to make sure they were on, and then they sent us back out to the company area. I remember that we waited there for almost an hour before moving out to the land nav course, which was only about 500 meters from Camp Rogers. Of course, as is my luck, it started raining. At this point, I was a little ashamed of myself. We were on day 2 of Ranger School, and I was tired as hell, and I was sore and really hating everything we were doing. We were given our points and headed out onto the land nav course. Now, I used to never run on land nav courses. I always like to walk and take my time, get to an attack point, shoot an azimuth, check to make sure the point is right, plan my route to the next point, and then move out and just repeat that. This was an awful strategy. I found my first point really easily, but when I started looking for my second point, I became infuriated when I couldn't find it. I plotted it again, went back to an attack point, paced it off, and still couldn't find it. I kept doing this, looking in vain for the point. I knew that if I couldn't find this point, I'd have to run to the other side of the course to find enough points to pass. The standard was 4 out of 5 points in 4 hours. I repeated this process of moving back to the attack point, shooting an azimuth, trying to find my point maybe 3 times. I was trying to keep my frustration and anger under control. But with the rain falling, all my stuff soaked, my eye protection broken, my map and my scorecard were wet, I just lost it. I stumbled around for over an hour trying to find my point. I was desperate. I knew that if I failed, I could redo it the next day, but I also knew that I'd be even more tired and my head would be less clear in 24 hours. So as I headed back, I decided to do something really, really stupid. I was thinking to myself, well, let me see if I can just trick the RI who's checking the scorecards and see if I can get a passing grade. Before I got back to the start point, I put random numbers on my scorecard where the point number would go. And I even took my pencil and made common punch marks in the spot where the punch marks go. I was so tired, I didn't even make a backstory to cover this. Instead, I figured if they asked me, I would just fess up and just say, yeah, I just tried to guess. My hope was that the RI was just going to look at the scorecard briefly, look at the key, and then just say, yeah, it looks close enough, and then say, you're good to go. Bad idea. The RI quickly realized that my points were all wrong, and he asked me, Ranger, where did you find these points? I could easily have lied my way out of the situation, but I just said, I made the punches with my pencil and wrote down random numbers. I was relieved when the RI laughed out loud and shared this hilarious story with the RI behind him. And he just said, get out of here, Ranger, you're a no-go. But my relief was short-lived when a captain, the company commander, stopped and said, hold on, Ranger. What if he had been busy and looked at your scorecard and just said you were a go? I began to say that I would have taken it and moved out, but he cut me off and said, you would have gone on your merry way knowing you had cheated the system. Stand over there and wait for me. I waited for about 30 minutes when an RI came out with a clipboard and a piece of paper I assumed was a serious offense report. I was screwed. Getting an SOR at Ranger School, especially as a lieutenant, is a big deal. They could bar you from ever coming back to the school again. So I kind of started to panic. The RI asked me my roster number and my name. The captain came out. He stared at me and told the RI to go back inside. At that point, I was pretty sure that I was off the hook. All I was going to get was a good chewing out, which is exactly what I got. And I completely deserved it. It went something like, "You're at Ranger School. You're an officer. You should be ashamed of yourself. What if your subordinates did this? Land nav is the one thing you should be good at." He was 100% right. I felt horrible. I felt like such an idiot. This was such a stupid thing to do, and it was a really hard lesson to learn. At that point, I thought I was good at land nav, but failing on my first attempt at Ranger School was a huge wake-up call. Anyway, I walked over to Charlie Company, which is where my buddies Chad and Matt were hanging out. Turns out they failed too. For some reason, this made me feel a lot better. But as we talked about it, we were confident that in 24 hours, we would pass and we'd be on our way to the next stage. Chad and Matt were both awesome soldiers. We were all in the same platoon during IBOLC, and we were really good friends. Chad lived on post with his wife, and Matt and I hung out all the time. So we all became really good friends. Matt was a fantastic soldier. He was one of those guys that made everything look easy. He had a perfect score on the PT test, the highest score in marksmanship during IBOLC, and he was one of the first to complete the land navigation course with a perfect score at IBOLC. And Chad was just as good. He was a stud, really good at PT, great leader, and I was shocked that both these guys had failed. We moved from the land navigation course back to Camp Rogers. Now, that day we did the basic skills test where we had to emplace a claymore, disassemble and reassemble weapons, load, fire, and correct a malfunction on those weapons, and some other basic tasks. Now, I was bummed the entire time because I was worried about the land nav test the next day. I passed the basic skills test with no problems, but I was still mentally not in a good spot. After that, we moved back to the company area. We got some classes on squad ambushes and recons and how to occupy an objective rally point, something we'll talk about later. After that was chow, and then we had a 2-mile buddy run and the Malvesti obstacle course. During the brief for the buddy run and the obstacle course, everyone was assigned a ranger buddy. We were told that we had to run a marked 2-mile route, but it was actually a little more than 2 miles. During the run, we had to carry our weapon and our camelbacks. The run ended at the obstacle course. Now, once we reached the obstacle course, we had to give our weapon to the instructor, place all of our equipment in neat rows, and once we did that, we could begin the obstacle course. Now, if you could just run straight through this obstacle course all at once, Malvesti might be one of the easiest obstacle courses in the Army, but you don't just run straight through. There are so many Ranger students that have to go through that you have to wait in a very long line at the beginning of the course and at each obstacle. While we were waiting in line, we got smoked. Bad. Flutter kicks, front back goes, push-ups, squats, etc. Now, the big variable here was during the run. And, well, the big variable for the run and the obstacle course was the fitness level of your Ranger buddy. During the run, you have to stay within 5 meters of your buddy, and during the obstacle course, you can't advance to the next obstacle until your buddy completes the obstacle. Now, the reason this is important is because if you're really fast on the run, you get to the obstacle course ahead of everybody else, and then you can go through the obstacles. You have a lot less waiting, so you get through the obstacles really fast, and then you're done. If you're really slow on the run, you have the entire Ranger class in front of you, and so you're having to wait, and so you're going to get way more smoked than if you would if you had been fast on the run. Okay, so for the obstacle course, each student was given 3 attempts at the obstacle. If a student couldn't complete an obstacle, the student was given a minor minus. Now, 3 minor minuses equals a major minus. 3 major minuses during rap week, and you're dropped from the course. Kind of reminds me of that episode of The Office when Dwight is keeping tabs on Jim and is like, "Oh, here's a demerit. 3 of those, and you get a reprimand. 3 of those and you get a citation. And like it, anyway, that just reminded me of that. All right, so let's talk about my ranger buddy. He was horrible. He was really slow on the run. That didn't annoy me that much. I didn't really mind it, but he was terrible on the obstacle course. We finished the run, placed our equipment in the line with the other equipment to start the obstacle course. So after we got smoked, it was finally time for me and my ranger buddy to begin the obstacle course. We climbed the first wall, then we had to lunge to the next wall, wait in line, get smoked, get released again. This happened between the first 2 or 3 walls. When we got to the tallest wall, which required one ranger buddy to help his buddy up and then pull him up, so it was a 2-man effort required to get over the wall. As I ran up to the wall, I told him, look, I'll give you a boost so you can climb up the wall. When you get to the top, turn around and help me up. I slammed my back against the wall. I interlocked my fingers and motioned for my buddy to put his boot in my hands so I could boost him up. Anybody with any type of brains or coordination would have been able to figure this out very quickly, but he somehow screwed it up. We tried again and screwed it up again and again and again. Finally, the RI told us that we were pathetic. Then he smoked us and let the other buddy teams go while we had to stand there and watch. After about 15 minutes of watching other buddy teams successfully complete the obstacle, we were told to try again. I turned to him and said something like, do not screw this up. I put my back against the wall and helped boost him up. Somehow he found the strength to get to the top of the wall. I took a few steps back, then ran and jumped towards the top of the wall. I got a good grip on my ranger buddy, and he grabbed my belt and helped me get to the top. That was the final wall obstacle, and we're not even at the obstacle course yet. Those are just the walls that are next to the obstacle course. The first obstacle was the rope climb. I climbed it the same way I always did. I used my legs to pinch the rope, and then I climbed up in little increments. I got to the top, only to look down and see my ranger buddy struggling to get up. He was a second lieutenant, and he couldn't even climb a rope. Well, I was a second lieutenant and couldn't do land nav, so I guess pick your poison. It had nothing to do with being tired. I could just tell by looking at him that no one ever took the time to learn rope climbing techniques. He had never taken the time to learn rope climbing techniques. So I was pissed. I climbed down the rope and I tried to encourage him, tried to show him the technique, but on the obstacle course at Ranger School with dozens of RIs screaming and students waiting in line, this is not what we would call an ideal learning environment. So he tried and failed twice more. He received a minor minus, and then we moved on to the next obstacle. So we were smoked again before we did the confidence climb. I jumped up on the obstacle and began climbing. Only one problem. My legs started cramping severely. With the first cramp, I thought to myself, there is no way I'm going to have the stamina to successfully complete the land nav course in only a few hours. And even if I did, I definitely can't do the 12-mile road march. I was in really bad shape, physically and mentally. I somehow managed to weasel my way over the obstacle and wait for my ranger buddy. We then had to jump into a pit of disgusting, muddy, cold water. We low crawled through the water and then had to execute sets of push-ups and mountain climbers, presumably to get our hands really muddy to make the upcoming monkey bars more challenging. We couldn't just wipe our hands on our uniforms because our uniforms were also covered in mud. Our only option was to attack the monkey bars head-on. My forearms were already burning from the prior obstacles, and my arms were tired from all the push-ups. My ranger buddy fell on the first bar. I made it all the way to the end, but slipped on the very last bar. I fell into the muddy water below. I knew I had 2 more tries, but I also knew that trying to complete this obstacle would be an exercise in futility. I made it to the 3rd bar both times before again falling into the water. After the monkey bars is another descent into disgusting muddy water, and then a low crawl under barbed wire. At the end, there's a set of pull-up bars where an RI made the group do pull-ups while spraying people in the face with a water hose. Again, attempting pull-ups was an exercise in futility, and we all got yelled at. Once the RI had declared that we had had enough, he wrote down our roster numbers and told us to go back to the barracks to shower and change. I did exactly that. My uniform and boots were covered in muck. Bringing only 2 pair of summer boots was a terrible idea. I should have brought at least 1 more pair. We were done with the obstacle course around 2100, and we had to be standing in formation on the company area at about 2200. Once we got outside, we again got smoked late into the night. All I remember from that night is getting 45 minutes of sleep before having to get up for land nav. Oh, wait. I also remember Staff Sergeant Rodriguez going into the barracks and dumping out everything in my locker because I left it unsecured. This was a huge blow. It was a huge blow mentally. I was proud of myself, however, for detaching myself from the situation, cleaning up my equipment, and driving on. I also remember waking up during my 45-minute sleep period to use the bathroom. I remember it only because I thought all the bones in my feet were broken. It hurt that bad. I remember waking up for land nav and just thinking to myself, I am screwed, but I'm going to try to get through this. I am screwed, but I'm going to try to get through this. And that's the end of day 2. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll see you for the next installment where we'll go through day 3 of Wrap Week. Thanks so much. Rangers lead the way.